Okay, what I want to try to do here is to capture a lot of the conversations that occur in the gym after training with some of the interns that we have out for the summer. So every now and again we'll just take a topic and discuss the topic and just kind of go from there. For this one, I told them the topic ahead of time. We talk about his weak point training, so I'm going to have them ask some questions in regards to that. And then with each one in the future, there'll be a different topic, or if you would like something asked, you know, just toss it up and let us know. So what questions do you guys have in regards to weak point training?
So I guess I'll start. Obviously, every athlete is going to have more than one factor contributing to their weak point. How would you prioritize multiple factors that lead up to the weak point, and how would you manage that across the training week and longer term across a macro cycle?
All right, you bring up a really interesting point, and this is something that's missed a lot, is just the term weak point training. I've never really liked, but I use it because that's what people really understand. So sometimes in this industry, you got to use terms that people understand more so than what they really are. Weak point kind of alludes to the fact that there's a certain spot in a lift that is inhibiting the lift from being able to become better. What Louis used to call it, and what I was always kind of taught, was a mini-max, which is basically the position at which that lift stops. The reason being, as he's pointed out, there's multiple facets. So if we use the example of a 2-board press with a power lifter, we're missing at about a 2-board press with a power lifter. The typical answer for that is going to be, well, you need to do floor presses, 2-board presses, you know, mid-range work that's right around that same area. A couple things seem to be forgotten quickly. The first, not every mini-max or every weak point is physical. There's technical, physical, and mental. Physical makes up, I just throw percentages out of my ass, all right? So I will say that technical makes up pretty much 70% of it, where physical maybe 20 and mental 10. 10's one of those things I just don't want to deal with. You know, I'm not a coach. I mean, you may have to if you're working with somebody, because that is a coaching aspect. What do you need to do to be able to get them over that? Because they could just be scared. Using the example of the bench press missing halfway, who is to say, just based upon missing halfway or a video showing that they missed halfway, how do you know this guy isn't missing halfway? Because he's always missed halfway. So over the past 5 years, every single time he misses a bench, he misses it at exactly the same spot. So what do you think's going through his mind when he takes it out and he starts lowering it and it's getting heavier and he starts pressing it back up? He's thinking, oh shit, boom, there it is. All right, that's never factored in. And I know one of you said that you were studying sports psychology. That is a huge aspect, because if that is the case, which with beginners and intermediates, it is a lot of the time, you got to start trying to figure out ways to overcome that and to work around it, which I said before, I really don't work with a lot. But when I was working with personal training clients, I would start misloading bars, not misloading, but I would load with dimes and 5s instead of loading with traditional plates. I would mix it up so they wouldn't really know what it was. I would bring in different boards. Instead of a 2-board, it was a 1.5 board. You know, I started changing things so psychologically they didn't know, and they may end up breaking their record and they didn't even know they broke their record. All right, because once they do it, it's gone. You know, then it's on to the next one. But that's just one example. Technique is most of the time, and my expertise is in the powerlifting. So my movement screens are the squat, bench, and the deadlift. So the first thing I'm looking at is the technique. You know, what's breaking down the technique, what needs to fix that technique, and then from there, where do we move forward? Everybody wants the physical answer. I miss my bench halfway, what exercise should I do? All right, what exercise should I do? All right, now we're still not even definitively at the right question. 2 board presses, what, for max effort work? For speed work? For accessory work? For what rep range? What is going on, you know, from a cellular level or from a contractile level to determine how you're even going to use the two-board press? You know, what happens when you go into missing the lift? Do you hit it and come right back down? Do you hit it, push, strain, 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 then come back down? Do you hit it, strain for a second, then come back down? Do you hit it, strain, but if somebody just tapped it a couple times, you would push it straight up? What happens there? Because you can do a two-board press for 20 reps if you want. I've used a two-board press for speed work on the floor. You know, I've used a two-board press for max effort work. You know, so you can't just say, okay, yeah, it's a two-board press. On the other side of the spectrum, I'm a big believer in conjugate training, so it's easier for me to explain mini-maxes using a concurrent or a conjugate method, because if you want to strip away everything from the conjugate method and say, look, I just left doing heavy singles and triples, that's essentially just a linear max effort method. All right, so why not just tell you the repetition and the dynamic effort method with it, because I'm still covering everything. You see what I'm saying? So in the bench press manual I wrote years ago, I took every dynamic bench cycle, which I think we just posted an article that had 2 of them in there. I think there were 40 of them that I remember doing during the time frame that I was at Westside, and they're broken into segments. These are the dynamic cycles you're going to use if you typically miss your bench at lockout. Here's the ones you're going to use if you typically miss off your chest. Here's the ones you're going to use if you miss midway. All right? Does that fix that mini-max? No, but it's fixing one aspect of that mini-max, because falling back onto the contractile ability of what's happening with that mini-max, how do you know that they're not missing because they're lowering the bar too slow? So when they go to press into it, their threshold for time under tension or their strength endurance is shot. It's already gone. Maybe we need to teach them to drop the bar faster so they can come back out faster. Maybe using bands will help with that, because it's going to increase the eccentric, so it's going to have overspeed eccentrics, which is going to create a greater stretch reflex or a greater concentric, power, which if all they need is that little tap, they come right through, there's your solution. Because all we need to do is to get them to go through that sticking point, just to tap through to break the record. All right, that's it. We just need them to go into it faster. Now, if they go into it and they push and they strain and they strain and they strain and they strain, now we're dealing with strength endurance, or some other type of. So when you're dealing with a mini match, you can't just say it's a 2-board prep. You got to look at the whole lift. What's going on technically? Is this actually? Chuck's a good example with his squat from the meet this past weekend. He squatted 615. 3 weeks ago, I don't think he could have squatted 5.5. Always was missing. He'd come out of the hole, he'd fall forward, come out of the hole, he'd fall forward, come out forward. And, so typically the powerlifting coach or the lifter is going to say, damn, I got to figure out what the hell I'm doing coming out of the hole, so I quit doing this shit. When you step back and you look at the forest through the trees, you realize he's not setting up right. So we realized when he was standing up, he was holding the bar on his back. He wasn't letting the bar ground him into the floor or seed him into the floor, basically letting the bar settle. I call it becoming one with the floor. And you can only do that by having control of your whole body in space, your torso, everything just coming together. And then when he got that and the torso came in there, now that transfer of force coming out of the bottom through his legs, instead of going into what was essentially a marshmallow, to fall forward, now becomes a rock. Complete transfer of force, 100 pounds on the lift. Or we could have sat there and said, well, fuck, you keep falling forward, we need to do more, good mornings, more good mornings, more good mornings, more, whatever the hell it is, because you're not looking at the total picture. So my first advice is, use the word sticking point, in a regular dialogue, but in your own mind, use the word mini-max, which is going to create you to think outside that one sphere. Because a lot of these things are not simple corrections. Some of them are. Some of them, like with Chuck, it's just a matter of, okay, we need to get this to start firing correctly. He understands it, bam, it's locked in, it's done. Typically, once you get through the beginning phases of lifting, strength and gains no longer become a linear process, so to say. It's more like a really fucked up staircase. It's like a spiral staircase that has a lot of holes in the floor. You know what I'm saying? So you just don't just keep, I'm going to put 5 pounds. You know, I remember thinking in high school when I was getting strong all the time, if I put 5 pounds on every 2 weeks, man, I'm going to be benching like 950 pounds. You know? It doesn't happen that way. You know, so you got to think in that long-term sphere. And some of them are going to be those quick fixes, which are taking that next big step. And it wasn't really so much that quick fix that made you take that big step. It's the 90 things you tried that didn't work, and it's also the base that you developed that allowed you to determine what that quick fix was, that base of education. That's why I'm so big on the educational aspect. Because if you didn't know that, you'd still be trying to think, what the hell, why can't I get out of the bottom? Or why are these 2 boards not working? Now you do get into some that are just biomechanically what I call motherfuckers. I mean, it's going to be somebody's nemesis just because this is how they're built. And now they can change it. You can always gain weight. You know, you can always take a 6'4" guy who's 220 who doesn't have the best leverages and make him 420 with really good leverages. So you can always change it. And in strength sports, you got to find that balance, you know, of where those leverages are going to. First, you need to find why you're really good. Because obviously sport and health, they don't linear progress together. You know, so if it is that you want to be the best strongman and you want to be the best powerlifter or whatever it is, there's going to become a threshold where, you know, health is going to become secondary to the progress that you make. And that's an individual choice. I'm not one to judge anything. It just needs to be in the mind going into there, because obviously you're not going to succeed very well as a 6'4", 198-pound powerlifter. It just isn't going to work, you know, unless you're just some fucking freak. And then it's still probably not going to work, because have we ever seen it before? You know, I'm not saying that you can't be the first. You know, I've always said genetics are important, and a lot of people always say, well, you know, these people always have the best genetics, and, you know, sport, and we all know that. You've all been around. You know, people with great genetics always rise to the top. But if you haven't been in the sport for very long, you know, 3, 5 years or whatever it is, how do you know you don't? You know, a lot of people who have really good genetics quit before they realize just how good their genetics really were, because it's still hard. You know, even with the guys with good genetics, it's still hard. You still got to show up. You got to still deal with adversity and make the time. Now I could keep psychobattling around with this. Based upon this, or if you want to go down different directions, because I was trying to, this is a really hard answer, because how do you phase it out over a macro cycle? You know, and that's dealing with block training. And the quick answer to that is, I would really, really try to focus it on one block and see what kind of difference that we can make in that block, and see if that difference becomes significant. If it becomes significant, then I would try to build it back into another one. If that difference really isn't that significant because it is that biomechanical motherfucker, you're just going to have to get stronger. You know what I'm saying? You got to find other ways to get stronger. People, and we see this every day, people with shitting technique, just god-awful technique, they still put 20 or 30 pounds on all their lifts. Just because you have bad technique doesn't mean you can't get stronger. We see it all the time. It's just not the healthiest thing in the world to do. But sometimes you will be dealing with those things where how much, you got to look at the cost of benefit. Where if in strongman's a little bit different because you have multiple events that you're dealing with. If it's pulling power, it's definitely significant. If it's like a horizontal press, is it really significantly that important to put that much focus on during a block when there's so many other things that could take precedent. So I would put that little bit of importance, experiment. Hey, yeah, we got it to move, that's cool. Then fine, or I'm not going to keep bothering with this for 6 blocks or whatever it is, when in the same time I can get my vertical press up, significant, more so than I'd ever get beat here. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you can increase your deadlift by far more than you're going to get beat on the bench by. So it's being a competitor and looking at it that way. From a bodybuilding standpoint, same thing, but now you're dealing with body parts, you're dealing with aesthetics, and you're dealing with those type of things. Those become tricky because there's this unanswered question, which is called, what are the judging standards? And you don't really know. I have seen over the years of kind of looking at John's physique and a couple others. I like to see, and when I look at them, I like to put them up against something that I have a vertical and a horizontal line. So I can tell them step forward, step sideways. I'm not looking for better lighting. What I'm looking to see is if I can get that vertical line to split straight down their body. So when I'm looking at them from the back, I can see, is this right delt as high as this, is the left delt? Is this a posture? Is it a tilt? Is it the hip? Is the hips out? Is this leg? So you're looking for a right to left balance, upper to lower body balance. That's all that shit matters, when it comes to that. And then the muscle groups. And if it's a muscle group that's not step back from the firing, not responding, really falling behind, is the muscle group falling behind because it's also part of a complex that's working the same compound group of movements. So pressing, okay, bench pressing, incline pressing, dumbbell pressing, chest, shoulders, triceps, then you got, the stabilizer, which is lats and all that kind of stuff. If everything else is growing except your chest, and all you're doing is pressing stuff, well, maybe you need to step back and think, well, what is the primary function of the pec? Is it shoulder rotation, shoulder extension, or is it, arm abduction? How much arm abduction is actually being put into the program? So kind of looking at that. Questions? Anybody? You got to fire at least one question. You got to what?
You pretty much crushed my question. I was just going to ask, when it comes to injuring yourself, what kind of mindset do you need to have to get over that new mini-max that you've established with your new injury to push through that?
I'm going to answer specific to you because I know you're in physique. Okay? Doesn't matter. There's no change in mindset whatsoever. The only change in mindset needs to be, what exercises do you need to avoid? What exercises do you need to do to still stimulate the muscle? The advantage of being in physique or in bodybuilding is your options are endless. It's just, at its very basic level, it's breaking down muscle, feeding it, and allowing it to recover, and doing it again. That's pretty much at its basic level. Obviously, it gets way more complicated, otherwise everybody would be jacked. But what I would do is, my answer would be completely different if it's a competitor and it's an exercise that they have to do. When it's not, I always fall back on, when I look through my history and I look through the people that I've known in strongman and I've known in powerlifting, which are the sports I've been the closest to for 30 years. The ones that have been hanging and banging for the longest time. Keep in mind, most people in these sports, if they even do get to an elite level or a higher mastery level, last 3 to 5 years. Everybody likes to talk like they're veterans and long timers. They're not. They have no fucking clue what it's like to be, a long timer in the game. And I look at the injuries of the guys who have been bodybuilding, well, physique hasn't been around that long, but training for bodybuilding style, however it's going to be, for 30 years, 40 years, and they're still doing it now. they're nowhere near as fucked up as all of us powerlifters were. So I do know one thing for certain: load matters. Load matters, and I also think movement pattern matters, because I think a lot of strongman's actually not as dangerous. If you look at injuries, I see powerlifting. This is just anecdotal. This is my own from what I've seen. Powerlifting from the strength sports, powerlifting's first, and then strongman, and then body. Strongman has more variance with movement patterns. All right, powerlifting is 3 movement patterns, two movement patterns essentially. That's it. Doesn't change. And that's where you live, and your accessories live there, and all your supplemental exercises live there. You live there, and not only do you live there, you try to master shortening and making that movement pattern the shortest you can possibly make it. All right, so fall back. It's just Wendler said in one of his videos, who would he go to for advice? Would be me, because I told him to quit. If he could go back in time. It's kind of true. But there's ways around it. So that's my answer to you: is that it shouldn't be a problem. If it is a problem, then you're looking for the wrong answer. The answer should be, what other things can I do? Granted, every one of us have exercises we just love to do, and typically the exercise that you got hurt on, from my experience, is the number one best exercise to use to rehab with, because what's going to be more specific to the muscles that were injured than the movement that actually hurt. Now you got to be smart about how you do it, and I always recommend and have to recommend work with a good physical therapist and so forth, and there's ways around it. But you can actually come back a little faster if you do that. So if it was, say you happen to tear your hamstring doing, and I've done this, doing a one-leg hamstring curl, stand. You tear it on the stupidest shit. Yeah. So I tear it on that, and you're like, oh shit, how long is this one gonna take? With you got a show, if you got things coming up, that changes the dynamics of everything. You need it to be done with in a week. Is kind of the goal. In that case, if it were me, I would be back on it the next day, just doing very, very small partials with no weight, just getting blood in it. I'm a big ice guy. People hate ice. I'm still an ice guy. I think I've hurt myself more than anybody. So that day, I'm going to ice it, because I want blood out of it. I don't want swelling. I don't want bruising. I don't want that. I don't want inflammation. All right. Now the next day, I do want blood. If there's bruising, I'm going to wait until the bruising starts to go away. Then I'm going to start to put in movement, and it's going to be a lot of movement. So if it was me and that was the exercise, I'd be doing it. I have the luxury to do this, or I would take a band. If I didn't, I'd be doing 500-600 reps per day. Multiple sessions per day. For me, it was if I pulled a hamstring, it was typically on the deadlift. So I would use, I call it stripping the rack. Act like I'm doing deadlifts with the Smith machine. You know how it rides up and down the rails? Well, I would take a bar against the power rack and let it slide up and down the rack. And I would set the safety pins at just at that level that was just low enough that was, that hurts, but no lower, just very mild pain. And then I would do sets of 15 or 20, and step away, and maybe do 5 or 6 sets while I was working with the client. And then 2 hours later, I would go back, keep the bar set up, because in a commercial gym, rack's never used, damn bar's be there all day long. I never had to worry about it. Usually by the end of the day, I could move it down, or I had to put quarters. It depends on the rack. Some racks got stupid old spacings. They're not elitefts racks. I'd have to stand on plates, and then I'd work down that way. But my goal typically, if I pulled it on a Monday, which would be a max effort day, I was not going to miss squatting Friday. So then I would do squatting Friday. Is a physique or a bodybuilder, I would have them ready for that, because you can train around it for a while. But I would try not to miss any sessions. Does that answer that? Mentally, you have no choice. Mentally, when it comes to injuries, the first thing is, I'll tell you when it's time to quit. Is as soon as you get hurt and you're on the floor or wherever it is, the first thing that comes to your mind is not, fuck, how long is this going to take? When you're on the floor after you get hurt, and the first thing that comes to your mind is just, oh shit, you're done. You know, I've seen it too many times. And you can see it, because the guys will ask. Because the first thing they'll do while they're on the floor, or after they get back up and carry it away, they're going to find the same guy, they're going to find somebody who's had the same injury before they even go anywhere. And he's like, hey dude, your bicep, how long did that take? You know? And then you're going to say, you know, about 4 weeks. Did you have surgery? You know, so they're getting this all planned out before they even leave. When that stops happening, you know, that's the indication, because mentally, you check it. And every time I've seen that happen and they keep trying to go, it just slowly, progressively becomes less and less fun for the person to be able to.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah.
So let's take like a next step. So once you break past that initial struggling with that mini-max, what's your next step to make sure you can keep making progress?
You're going to have another problem.
Somewhere along the line?
Yeah, I mean, it's never a smooth ride. You're always on a tsunami.
Well, I'm saying for that specific mini-max, like let's say go back to the 2-board press, you were saying you missed that. So once you start to make progress and you can break through that mini-max somewhat consistently, how do you ensure that you're not regressing and going back to that mini-max?
Okay. Just given the nature of most strength cycles, because you're going to have, you know, you can say you're not, I can sit here and say I never had an off season. That's kind of bullshit. You know, I was always 6 to 8 weeks out from the meet, but there were always variants. You know, I never let myself get less than 90% of my strength, but like I said, there were always variants. The reason I'm pointing this out is you're always going to be at some point in a training cycle, and usually by the time you're going to get hit with a mini-max, isn't going to be at the very front end of the training cycle, because even concurrent training and so forth is more conditioning, GPP type oriented. You know, it may not always be heavy singles for the max effort work, it may be triples, and it's definitely not the max effort work that, for me, I use the max effort exercises that carried over most towards the last 8 weeks of the meet. I saved them in my treasure chest. I used them no other time of the year. I only used the dynamic training cycles that I knew worked for sure before a meet. They were in my treasure chest. You know, so all that other time beforehand was experiment to find more things to put in the tool chest, but there are a lot of things that didn't. You know, so when you're during that experimental phase, a lot of these mini-maxes just might be fake. You know, it's because you're trying something new out and it just didn't work, and something kind of popped up where you're like, oh shit, what happened here? And you're like, okay, I got this, and you start putting back in extensions or, you know, whatever you took out to put in, because you're replacing things. You put those back in, boom, it comes right back. So once you get through that and you address it and that mini-max starts to get better, you're going to be into like the home stretch, which is going to be the last 5, 4, 3 weeks before the meet. So there's nothing else to change. There's just building the volume or you know, however your cycle's set up. Some build volume, as I did, some will reduce volume, you know, as they get ready for the meet. And then you have the meet. And then you're going to have whatever you're going to do after the meet. So what I would do is take really good notes, you know, not just sets and reps and all that kind of bullshit, real detailed notes. Like, it 8 weeks out, this came, this is how I addressed it, this worked, or this didn't work, but it came at 8 weeks out. Because it will come again. You see what I'm saying? So if you got to work around it and you know it's still going to be there, so you've had to already adjust, okay, my bench is not going to be what I thought it was going to be. So instead of that 30-pound PR I was looking at, let's just shoot for that 5. But you have all the notes, what led up to it, what caught, you know, what did not work. So then after the meet, you got a longer period of time. So now you can address it from a different standpoint. Now you can address it more from a hypertrophy, repetition method standpoint. Maybe it was strength endurance. Now you can address it from different cellular aspects than you could be 8 weeks out. 8 weeks out, you're not going to start doing 300 extra reps per week. You could, you know, but there's that risk benefit which may or may not
Be worth it.
play into it. Typically, once you do have that sticking points change, you know, and over the years, what I've seen with lifters is raw or geared with shirts, it always moves up. It's like the more novice lifters I've seen will always be missing off their chest. And if it's novice and they're in a shirt, well, they don't know how to touch, so they're missing it off their chest. So they're missing for the same reasons. And then the stronger they get, the higher that becomes. And then typically what you find at the top level, most guys are getting it more than halfway up. So then it just becomes a matter of how to create the best program to master the lockout without destroying your elbows. That's what comes into play with the injuries and all the other stuff. Is over time and over wear and tear and over age and over experience in the sport, those mini maxes, they're still there, but they become a little bit more difficult to attack because you know what you need to attack. It may fuck up your shoulders, it may screw up your elbows, and there's only so long you can really go after it before those things start to set in. So you learn, I got 4 weeks that I can do this before I know my shoulders are going to fire up. All right, so I'm not going to hit it right now. I know it's there, but I'm going to hit it here in 2 more weeks. So you got to learn when to step back, when to back it down, you know, when to be patient. Being young is great because you can just jump on shit all the time and experiment with it. And overtraining isn't as prevalent because you're going to recover as long as you're getting the nutrients as well. What you guys will find being younger is the overtraining and the recovery isn't going to feel like joint pain and beat up and sluggishness and that kind of stuff. It's just going to feel like your max strength really won't change that much. Your explosive strength really isn't going to change that much. No matter how bad you feel, how tired you are, you're still going to feel like you could pop something fast and you could still grind out pretty well. Where you're going to feel it is if you could typically get 10 reps on one thing, you might only get 8. That's your clue. So your indicators change as you get older, all right? And that's just, you know, the body's ability to recover. So when you start missing reps on your supplemental work and your accessory work, that's when I would start looking at your training a little bit closer as far as the selection, or actually before that, looking at the recovery, and then looking at the training, and then going from there. Anything else?